No, not that Drive, for God's sake. Today I have a little treat for you all in that I'm going to review the 2011 action drama film Drive. It has a significant cult following and is one of my all-time favourite movies. Drive is about exactly what it says on the tin. It's a film about a driver who, you guessed it, drives. It sounds boring, I know, but this film isn't a high-octane Fast and Furious ripoff, nor is it a Los Angeles taxi driver simulator. It is a film with style, grit, romance, and tragedy, and received a standing ovation when screened at Cannes Film Festival. If for whatever reason you're watching this video without having seen Drive, you should probably go and do so, because I'm going to be spoiling this film so hard that it'll be crying by the time I return it to its mother. But first, a little context. The director of Drive is Nicolas Winding Refn, who found breakthrough success with his crime trilogy Pusher. Drive is Refn's first American production, but despite that, his exploration of brutality continues throughout his works. This can best be seen in both his 2008 film Bronson, as well as how he got kicked out of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for throwing a table at a wall. It's unsurprising that the film's heavy visual style was inspired by the great Stanley Kubrick. Despite directing Drive, Refn does not drive at all and failed his test 8 times. This may have played into the fact that during pre-production, Ryan Gosling would drive his director around Los Angeles at night to find shooting locations for the film. When interviewed by Jesse Thorne, Refn claimed that on the first day he met Ryan Gosling, he was stoned on anti-flu pills he'd been given by none other than Harrison Ford. The opening scene is probably one of the best set-up hooks for a movie ever. Before anything even happens, the sound of cars whizzing by is heard as some production credits are shown. We see the basketball game that he listens to on the radio and arrives at by the end of the heist right there on the TV. It would seem at first like the driver just loves basketball, but the twist that he blends right into the crowd as the match finishes is such a satisfying twist. It presents the meticulous planning that goes into the heist on the part of the driver.
There's 100,000 streets in this city. You don't need to know the route.
The intensity of the chase itself comes in such drastic waves, assisted by the fantastic soundtrack. When Driver goes into hiding, either behind a truck or under a bridge, the music loses its ticking sound, or simply disappears entirely with a long organ note being introduced. It's totally mind-boggling that this film was nominated for the sound editing Oscar, only to be snubbed by Hugo? How on earth can Hugo compete with this? Visually, we always see the skyline of downtown LA from a distance. We see so much of the city surrounding it, which may have been done for budgetary reasons, but reflects the underbelly of crime that every city has. Instead of an expensive chase, Driver uses this darkened, less-known environment to hide from the authorities. All the cinematography of this segment focuses on the car, or what the characters see from within the car. Accompanied by some extreme close-ups on Driver, all this camera work ramps up the intensity and claustrophobia these characters are feeling. It's almost like we're in there with them. Funnily enough, the director is actually sat inside the vehicle, where the camera is often positioned to emulate the feeling of a driver in an ocean of sharks. The titles burst onto the screen with Kavinsky's Night Call, and I mean, what a banger! Get it? 'Cause banger racing. It's so iconic and is played to reflect the relief of the driver. We see more of those LA shots displaying a land still stuck in the 1980s. The soundtrack doesn't use any music from the 80s, but gives off an 80s atmosphere, accompanied by the vehicles and locations. The two antagonists of the story, Bernie and Nino, are perfect examples of this idea too. One used to produce action movies in the 80s, the other wears a tracksuit and runs a pizzeria. Within 15 minutes of the movie, you understand that by day, the driver drives for Hollywood action movies, by night he drives for criminals. Such simplicity and silence on behalf of our protagonist is reminiscent of a young Clint Eastwood in a 60s spaghetti western. It both hardens this character and softens him, enabling him to be the romantic interest for his neighbor Irene, played by Carey Mulligan. A great example of visual storytelling is after the pair nearly bump into each other in the supermarket. As he's about to enter his car, he stops as though he's forgotten something, only for the character to turn and show Irene in distress. Then we cut to the elevator where he's holding both bags of shopping. Without any dialogue, we can put two and two together. Driver drives for a living and can obviously fix up her car so they can all go home. What I love most of all is this anxious hesitation on Gosling's face before approaching, unsure if he might be overstepping a boundary here. Despite being neighbours, they are still strangers. In Irene's apartment, we get a shot of her next to a framed mirror. Even before the absent father is mentioned, we get the impression that Driver has become a part of the family, but it's intrusive. He's not framed clearly with his back to the light and shown out of focus, compared to the bright, smiling Benicio and his father. The shots of the pair before Driver leaves are just so vibrant. The colours match the characters beautifully. Gosling's blue eyes, denim jacket in front of blue wallpaper, and Mulligan's brown eyes, blonde hair, golden earrings. The sunlight and orange walls just create such gorgeous images. It's hard to believe that the director of this film is colorblind. Then the film introduces the criminal elements. Ron Perlman is certainly an obvious choice for Nino, but Albert Brooks as his partner Bernie is just astounding. He's known for his voice roles like Marlin from Finding Nemo and that eco-friendly government guy in the Simpsons movie. He'd be the last person you'd think they'd pick. What I find amazing though is how he's broken through his typecasting to create a real piece of shit character, eating Chinese in a pizzeria. Even Nino, a Jew wanting to be an Italian gangster, knows exactly how to push people's buttons, even using a quip you would find in a Martin Scorsese film.
Take a fucking hike. I want to talk to my partner.
These two have so little respect for honest workers that they don't even shake hands with Shannon, played by Bryan Cranston. Even the kid who gets Bernie's lunch is off screen, the discomfort only displayed on Shannon's face. Only those with dirty hands, i.e. those guilty of crime, are worthy in the eyes of these gangsters. Even little Benicio is shown rubbing his hands, displaying his innocence in the story. This scene seems to show some reflections of Hollywood and how difficult it is to make a living from such a renowned film industry. This may come from Refn's own experience with debt from previous film projects, but in the pizzeria, Shannon complains that he fixes up cars only for them to be destroyed for one shot, which might not even be used in the final cut. We see this disposability in an earlier scene, and Bernie is also a character that has resorted to crime after his time as a movie producer. You know, I was gushing earlier about the lighting on our leading couple. The entire Human Beans segment has that gorgeous Californian orange sunset lighting on the characters when they're driving and sitting by the water. We see the driver place his coat around Benicio twice, indicating the protection he will be providing the family for the remainder of the film. As Irene says,
"That was good."
She's not talking about the excitement or thrill of the ride, she's describing how good a person Driver is. It's so obvious he's the remedy this family unit needs, but it will come at a cost. Driver is seen sitting on Irene's couch with another photograph of the absent father and Benicio, reminding us of the instability that could rear its ugly head at any moment. Even seeing Driver leaning on the doorframe as Benicio is put to bed, he's shown in shadow, still a stranger. I mentioned sharks earlier, and it comes back around in this tiny little segment when Driver and Benicio are watching TV.
Is he a bad guy?
Yeah,
How can you tell?
because he's a shark.
There's no good sharks?
No? Does he look like a good guy to you?
Even whilst Irene's friend enters the apartment, the driver is still in focus, pulling a rather concerned face. For Innocent, morality is fairly black and white. You have good guys and bad guys. For Driver, however, he reflects on his own actions and whether he is worthy of being a part of such an innocent family. Like with the car breaking down earlier, we get more of that wonderful unspoken storytelling going on here. We hear the phone ringing whilst Irene is getting ready for work, and then we cut to her telling Driver the short version of what was discussed on the phone.
That was my husband's lawyer. He's coming home in a week.
The moment she tells him this, they hit a red light. Could it just be a total coincidence? No, I see them hitting that red light as a sign of danger that will completely envelop both these characters for the remainder of the film. The homecoming party is quite a strange scene. We don't know why Standard is out of prison, how long he was meant to be in there for, or what crime he committed. All that matters is that he's back, and all the emotion pours out of Driver and Irene. The former, unable to occupy his mind whilst a party he cannot attend is happening next door, the latter painfully keeping up appearances. As the chorus of the song floods the speakers, the lyrics paint quite the firm picture that neither can stop thinking about the other. It's quite a straightforward thing to interpret, but the synth-pop 80s inspiration ties in with the previously used songs. Once again, I cannot compliment the soundtrack enough. As Driver leaves, he stares longingly at the door down the hall, but seeing Irene sat on the floor alone, a tidal wave of pity for the pair washes over the audience.
Sorry about the noise.
I was gonna call the cops.
I wish you would.
What seems like an awfully timed joke actually pulls on the heartstrings further. Now that Driver is no longer required to protect Benicio, he wears his scorpion jacket to protect himself from Standard, whose arm is wrapped around his son's chest, almost nervously reminding him of who's his daddy. The dialogue is very shaky as well, as though there's a bigger connotation hidden behind the phrase "help out." The tension just skyrockets here, and the lack of actual conflict reflects Refn's attitude towards violence. As the scene concludes, we see Standard's shadow on the wall, now replacing the shadowy figure that stood in the doorway in a previous scene. Shortly after the homecoming, when Driver finds Standard and Benicio in the parking lot, he is lit half in shadow, half in light. He will have to take up the mantle of protecting the family from their own father's misfortunes. When Driver goes over to the families for dinner, he's framed yet again with a photograph of Standard and Benicio in a frame. Now that Driver is doing crime during daytime, this is immediately a recipe for disaster. As Driver waits for Blanche and Standard to return from the heist, the sound of a train honking in the background is heard, almost warning Driver not to go through with this. It all ends in disaster, followed by a terrific chase sequence. Now that there is a constantly pursuing car, we get those same claustrophobic shots of Driver and passenger, this time accompanied by wide exterior shots, spinning and tilting to create disorientation. This ticks all the right boxes for a good chase sequence in Roger Ebert's view, as one of the family's protectors has just been shot to death. If Driver doesn't make it out alive, God knows what will happen to the family. Finally, the pursuer's car gets totaled with this golden shot from the car's rear window. With this shot of the wheel fading into money, Refn makes a clear reference to cars equaling profit. There is so much money in the automotive industry, and draws another connection to their disposability for the sake of huge financial profit. Driver and Blanche aren't out of the woods yet though. We have a fantastic wide shot of Blanche in the mirror. It puts the driver out of focus, and they adopt the off-screen phoned sound again to indicate the betrayal she's about to perform. It's as though the camera is trying to say that she's two-faced by literally showing her face in the frame twice. When Driver calls Benicio, we see a shot of his jacket slowly rising, reinstating his position as protector of the family. However, the camera tracks to the left the moment Benicio says Irene is talking to the police, indicating she is protected and that his protection is not required right now. I love the way Driver points his finger at Blanche. He doesn't carry a gun, but he points his finger at her like he's holding a gun. The score fades away into silence as Blanche cleans herself up in the bathroom. These slow zooms indicate Driver's realization of Blanche's betrayal, with the final shot of her alive shown in the mirror again, having to face her shame before having her head blown open. The use of slow motion works wonderfully here, a trademark of this director's style. It smothers the audience with the impact of this beautiful woman being turned into a hideous corpse. Then everything speeds up again so as not to gloss over the brutality our protagonist has to enact in order to survive. At the end of the scene, Driver moves back into the shadows, then moves out of frame to hide his shame. Right after this, we see a shot of Driver getting bullets pulled out of his arm. What's great about it is that as the camera moves down towards the injury, he looks away, indicating the audience to do the same. Driver then returns to Cook, the guy who set Standard up, with a hammer. It's quite a surreal scene given that there's no screaming upon Driver's entry. Only a couple of women leave the room, with the rest left staring. Some look down with their noses turned up as though Cook is nothing more than a stain on their carpet. Driver is not only overwhelmed with red backdrops, but is also surrounded by mirrors. When Driver is on the phone, the camera focuses on the women in the room, and I'm not really sure why this was done, but it made me wonder if they knew what had happened to Blanche. No doubt she would have come from a similar unfortunate background. Finally, we see Driver from a seriously low angle, visibly shaking and sweating, almost clutching the hammer for support. He looks completely distorted, transformed even from the good human being we saw him displayed as in earlier scenes. These two contrasting aspects of our protagonist are forced together in the elevator scene. They use the same pacing as the motel room scene, slowing everything right down before the fight begins. This time, the lighting changes to that familiar Californian sunset orange, with Driver's upper body shielding her, giving this thug a good look at the scorpion as an indicator of his status as protector. All this is a reminder of our protagonist's potential for goodness, to contrast horrifyingly with kicking this thug's head in. All the shots of Irene reacting is to show her the realization that she's just kissed a killer, even if it was for her protection. This is why she doesn't run away, as we see her staring back in the parking lot, surrounded by cars, now entirely enveloped in the Driver's criminal world. This final shot of Driver's back indicates the clash of good and bad the protagonist is capable of, all for the sake of protecting the family. When speaking with Scott Foundas for the Directors Guild of America magazine, Refn described the elevator scene as pivotally revealing for the Driver character. In one situation, Driver is a hopelessly romantic knight, but also completely psychotic and is willing to use any kind of violence to protect innocence. This is a prime example of a scene that conveys so many ideas and emotions through images rather than words. There's some fantastic editing going on afterwards when Driver confronts Shannon about what happened in the elevator. From these long fades, you understand that he's realizing who gave Nino his address, and the long fades make it look like he's premeditating what he's going to do to him. Even the little scene with Bernie and Nino is fantastic. You really get the impression the only reason Driver and Shannon are caught up in this mess is because a middleman decided to bite off more than he could chew, and that they are in so deep now with some East Coast mafia shit that cold-blooded murder is all that can rectify this mess. And damn, Bernie murdering Shannon is so interesting. Not only because Shannon knows his life is over, but also because Bernie expresses regret over what he's doing. Even giving Shannon a merciful death gives him more humanity than we might give him credit for. Unlike Nino, who we see trying to accost a woman, seemingly unsuccessfully, inside his own pizzeria. This is the pitiful sight of a man paying for a woman's company. This whole sequence has Riz Ortolani's Oh My Love playing underneath it, which fits perfectly seeing as nobody is really going to miss Nino after he's gone, with Driver's intention of making tomorrow a brighter day as a result of killing him. I thought it rather mischievous as well that Driver kills Nino's driver by driving into him. It does seem astonishing that he was able to make his way back to where he was so quickly, and it was surprising too that the front of his own car looked rather untouched by the impact. However, it's the cold calculation that makes this moment so satisfying to watch. The drowning of Nino fits in perfectly with the narrative too. After Driver has killed Nino, he references the animal fable, The Scorpion and the Frog, whilst on the phone to Bernie, the moral of which appears to be that vicious people often cannot resist hurting others, even when it's not in their own interests. If we remember as well that a scorpion is imprisoned printed on the back of Driver's jacket, this foreshadowing is absolutely applause-worthy. The writer and director's refusal to cave into cliché is seen when Irene and the driver speak on the phone for one last time. There's no "I love you" heard, just him expressing gratitude that he got to spend time with her and Benicio before he meets his end. Bernie's final scene gives Driver the rundown of what he's condemned to be for the remainder of his life, whether he survives the encounter or not. The way that the two characters are framed in the restaurant indicates the mutual understanding that one of them is not going to make it out alive. Both appear like scorpions, showing each other's stinging tails in the form of knives, and we see Driver's killing in the form of shadows on a pavement. You could call this cheap, but it seems to me like the sun is shining on Driver for his final violent act. He has successfully protected the family. We then get this extraordinarily long shot of Driver looking very much dead until the music starts playing and he blinks. We, like Gosling, hold our breath as the camera ascends from bloody foot to breathless face. He then drives away without the money so that the East Coast Mafia can find it without issue. This leaves Irene and the driver permanently separated, but the hero achieved what he set out to do without concern for anything other than driving. Like the lyrics of the song say, the family is all safe and rescued from the slowly sinking ship. Thanks for watching. This video was requested by a very generous supporter on Patreon. What do you think of this movie? Comment below your thoughts or join us for a chinwag on my Discord server, where we'll continue this discussion.